Hello, are we live? Hello, are you guys there? Hello, hello. Say something in the chat so I know you're there. Okay, so welcome. Welcome, everybody. Please say something in the chat. Say hello so I know you're there for our very first live stream. I'm hoping this is working. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to our first live stream. Let me double check this is working. Should be open. I'm just doing a little bit of background work here. I will be right with you. Okay. Double check on this, making sure everything's working properly. Okay. Hello, hello, everyone. Let me know you're there. Please say hello in the chat. Okay, good. All right, we're seeing people. Okay, yay. Hello, hello. Hello from Ireland. Yeah, Hugo, it is 2 a.m. What are you doing up? All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is I want to welcome you all to our very first live stream for my channel, Michelle's Analysis. And I want to say a big shout out to all of you subscribers. Thank you very much for supporting my channel and helping me build a community of inquisitive and very smart people. So I really enjoy your questions. And I want to let you know that I'm going to do a poll. I don't know if the poll, I wanted to get you guys to vote on a name for our community. Do we want to call ourselves the Analyzers, the Legal Analyzers, or I think somebody just sent me a message. Hi, Alan. Hi there. Hi, Viola and Jay. Hello to all of you. The Clerk of the Court, I think somebody sent me as a suggested name. So let me see if the poll, let me put the poll up really quick so you guys can go ahead and vote on our community name. I'll give you a couple suggestions and then you can give me your comments, your votes. Let's see. We'll put in legalizer, and then we'll add your suggestion here. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to post this. Let's see. All right, so that should come up. Okay, so go ahead and vote in the poll if you want. All right, so yeah, the poll should be up. It is. Right on. This is working. Okay, so I'm going to give you the update, a quick update on the Petito versus Laundrie case. That's the case in Florida where the parents, Gabby Petito's parents, are suing Brian Laundrie's parents for intentional infliction of emotional distress for basically withholding information regarding where Gabby Petito was and whether or not Brian had advised them that he had murdered Gabby. So the court gave the Petitos an opportunity to fix the complaint, basically, to add some facts because the court has to make a decision based on the four corners of the complaint. Are there enough facts alleged to sustain a lawsuit for intentional infliction? So today, I just did a video on the amended complaint where they added 4 counts and basically they had to distinguish which parent was suing which parent for what. So there's 2 counts where Gabby's mom is suing Brian's mom, and 2 counts where Gabby's father, Joseph Petito, is suing Brian's father. So whether or not it's going to survive a motion to dismiss, we have to see, because the big question is whether or not Brian's parents can use the Constitution as a defense. In other words, can they say that they don't have to speak? They have a right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment. They have the right to speak or not under the First. So that's a question the judge will have to decide. And I don't know what the date is yet for the motion to dismiss. Oh, and I did get a question. Somebody asked me whether they would be adding an affidavit to the amended complaint that was just filed yesterday. I don't think so. Usually they don't do that. Usually if they're going to amend the complaint and add anything with it, they do it at the time of filing. So I don't think that's true. But we'll see. Stranger things have happened. Hello, everybody. So let's see. Hi, Bonnie. Whose pig account? Michelle Elizers. Oh, that's good. I like that. That's a good one. Okay, so you let me know in your comments. What do you think? Do you think the Petitos can survive this motion to dismiss? Do you think that Brian's parents can rest their defense on the Constitution? So we'll see. Okay, so I just got a question from Minchitas. Do you believe Sunny will get away with an easier sentence than Elizabeth? Well, I'm going to transition now into the highlights of the Sunny Balwani case. So to answer your question, do I think he's going to get away with an easier sentence? Well, if Elizabeth Holmes takes the stand in Sunny Balwani's case, that will give her great leverage, presumably, to reduce her sentence. So in that case, I don't think, I don't know. At this point, well, let me put it this way. Given today's testimony by a new witness, not a witness who showed up in Elizabeth's case, this new witness ties Sunny to a few things. So do I think he's going to get an easier sentence? I don't know. Tough call to make. It's too early to make that call. But, a lot of times when jurors are facing, what are they facing? 12 counts? Sometimes they do come back with a mixed verdict. So we'll see. So, hi, Alan. So Alan says he sympathizes with the Petitos, but doesn't think they have a case. Well, the Petito case, it depends on whether or not state action, whether or not they can say, Brian's parents can say that that parents asking other parents for information doesn't involve the state. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't apply. It's going to be an interesting decision whether or not this case gets dismissed or whether the judge just allows the jury to make the call. But it's definitely a test case, and we'll see what happens. All right, so let me get back to Balwani's case. And I have some of your questions. Let's see. Let me do the update first on the highlights of the testimony. Then I have about a page or so of some of your questions that have been really good. And I'm trying to keep up with the chat too. So do say hello if you're joining. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. All right. So today we had some interesting things happen. And I think today's a toss-up to see how it turns out. But the defense wanted to get into, wanted to find out whether the government's going to be playing the recordings of the investor call that Elizabeth Holmes had, and whether or not that would incriminate Balwani. So the government is not going to be entering that into evidence. They're not going to be using that investor call where Elizabeth Holmes is talking to several of these investors and other prospective investors and making representations, which I think were pretty damaging in her case. But the interesting thing about that investor call is Balwani's not involved in that. So the government, I think, I don't know, I'm guessing, again, this is just my opinion. The government probably doesn't need it because I think this new witness today helped them quite a bit. So, but the judge ultimately ruled that he's not going to let in that investor call unless the government apparently brings it into evidence. So the defense wanted it to come in because they wanted the jury to hear exactly what Elizabeth Holmes said, not what an investor says she said. So, they may bring it up again in their case. All right. So what's the likelihood of Elizabeth Holmes testifying? Hugo asks. I don't know. She's facing 9 to 12 years. I think she just might take the stand. And why do I say that? Because she can start rehabilitating her reputation. Maybe she can do a little damage control on all that information that's going on out there about her and her case. Although she may not be needed, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But if she does take the witness stand, that is a significant factor the judge can consider in reducing her sentence. Because if you assist the government in their case, the judge in his discretion can apply that. Well, he can definitely apply that factor in reducing her sentence for her cooperation. But we'll see what happens. And somebody said, I suggest the Shells. Oh, that's cute. That's a good name. Could Elizabeth's sentence be reduced if she shows up pregnant in court again? All right. Well, that being pregnant or not pregnant is not an element or not a factor considered in sentencing. However, if your family relies upon you for their livelihood, then it could be considered. So I don't know, but she's of that age of having children that maybe she wants to have children, another child now, before she is facing a significant amount of time in prison. So we'll see. There's a lot of things unknown yet. And we still have some motions that the defense might make in the Holmes case to still challenge that verdict. So we'll see. We still have this to play out. She's not going to be sentenced until September. Okay, so let me get back to some more of these highlights. So, all right, who is that witness? Who's that new witness? This new person that we haven't seen before. His name is Patrick Mendenhall, and he's the CEO of an investment firm called U.S. Capital Advisors. And he took the stand and he testified today. He invested in Theranos. He personally invested in 2005 and 2013. He invested $50,000, and Sonny Balwani was his primary contact, not Elizabeth Holmes. Mendenhall said that he first heard about Theranos in 2005 from his advisor, David Harris, who knew Elizabeth Holmes' family. He said, when it came across my desk, I thought these guys were smart guys, so I decided to invest a little bit of my money. That's the $50,000. But he said he knew it was quite speculative. Then he said about 7 years went by and he hadn't heard anything. So I'm assuming he invested around 2005-06. He said he hadn't heard anything from the company. So he was, thinking that $50,000 may have been a loss. But then he was getting press releases, statements from Theranos in 2013. And he thought to himself, this was probably the most incredible investment opportunity that one can see. And what's important about those press statements is one of the allegations in the indictment is that Holmes and Balwani made false statements to the media, to constitute fraud. Now, if this investor relied on it, then that's going to be damaging towards Balwani. But here's the thing about Patrick Mendenhall. He is not one of the individual investor counts. He's not one of those counts, those 6 counts. I think his testimony goes to showing that between 2010 to 2015, the prosecution alleges that Balwani and Holmes engaged in a scheme to defraud, a conspiracy to defraud. So Patrick Mendenhall's testimony would be helpful to show the conspiracy to defraud investors, count 1. And you can look at my indictment video where I walk you through that whole indictment. Viola asks, why would she cooperate? Why would Holmes cooperate if she maintains her innocence? Well, bargaining would mean accepting responsibility. Well, if she has evidence and she wants to have an opportunity to reduce her sentence, this is her time. So we'll see if she does that. Sorry, Eyes ask, in the Petito case, if Petito's parents lose against the Laundries, could they potentially sue the police department for neglecting to adequately search the park? Well, there's a statute of limitations involved in that. They only have a certain amount of time where they could sue. I don't know about that. It's a good question, but I don't know. All right, so let's get to what else Mendenhall said. Mendenhall said that he had a 45-minute call with Balwani. He had a call with Balwani. So what statements did Balwani make about Theranos? Right? They needed witnesses and they need testimony. Witnesses and evidence to tie Balwani to the investors. And this Patrick Mendenhall's testimony definitely can tie Balwani to these investor counts, or at least to the conspiracy to defraud investor counts. So Mendenhall said that he told his partners that Balwani said the science behind Theranos is complete. Balwani told him the science behind Theranos is complete and no new science is needed, no new invention is needed, which made the firm want to invest more. And he said that Balwani was concise and confident when he was telling him, making these representations. He also said that Balwani never told him that Theranos was using non-Theranos devices, those third-party devices. He testified that Balwani said that they are not, he was never told that they were using third-party devices, okay? Which again is one of the allegations the prosecution is making to say it's fraudulent because they were using third-party devices, is what they're claiming. Then he was asked about the financials, right? They want to tie Sunny to the financials. So Mendenhall said that he asked Balwani for high-level financial information on Theranos, but Balwani didn't want to give him the data because he said they preferred to keep the competition guessing as to how much money they have and what their current revenue, profit margins, and revenue sources are. So Mendenhall asked for the financials. Balwani said no. We would like to keep the competition guessing. And he asked 3 more times for those financials. And did he get those financials? No. So the prosecution also asked Mendenhall to describe Sunny in these conversations. He said that Sunny Balwani was very articulate, very intelligent, very specific, and felt like he had a strong command on the details. And that Balwani was extremely credible and he knew everything about the business. Okay? That goes to rebut the defense's argument that basically Elizabeth Holmes, it was her company, it was her technology, and Sunny was just in the background dealing with the software, right? I think that's what they're claiming. So then what happened? Then we get to Mendenhall saying that after he had the conversation with Balwani, his firm invested, guess how much in Theranos? His firm invested $1.3 million in Theranos. They didn't have the financials and they invested $1.3 million. That's not uncommon. All of these investors did not have the financials, right? They were provided some financials, but they didn't have any audited financials. So he said that the company invested $1.3 million in Theranos in January of 2014, and he signed an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and he asked for more financial information, but Balwani never responded. In May 2014, he again asked Balwani for a high-level update on Theranos, but Balwani forwarded his email to Elizabeth Holmes and she didn't respond. Then in December 2014, Mendenhall sent Balwani another email asking questions because he was hearing rumors that the investors were concerned. The questions included whether Theranos tests at Walgreens required shipping samples and took 48 hours. Balwani again forwarded the email to Holmes and no one replied. He tried to get answers out of Theranos 4 times. He was getting no response. He was concerned. So what happened? He ended his direct examination by saying his firm lost all of that money, the 1.4 million plus the 50,000 he invested in, I assume. And on cross-examination, let me look at your comments before I get to cross. Okay, they played the media, says Hugo. Well, they certainly use the media, to get out their press releases and make the representations. Do I think Matthew's asking me, do I think Elizabeth Holmes is going to testify? I think she is going to testify. And I said in her case that she would testify. I think everybody else out there said she wouldn't. I said she would. You have to understand, I've done a lot of cases, tried a lot of cases. I've supervised a lot. I have trained lawyers. And I've, certainly prosecuted. When I was a prosecutor, I prosecuted a lot of cases involving domestic violence. And I had no doubt she was going to testify in her case. So she likes to, control the narrative, in my opinion. So why wouldn't she take the stand in Sunny's case? Maybe, jeopardizing her appeal. Maybe, I don't know. That's her call to make and her defense counsel's, in consultation with the defense counsel. But I still think she might take it. But let's see what other witnesses roll out in the government's case. Okay, so what did the defense, Balwani's attorneys, do on cross-examination with this investor witness testimony, so to speak, with Mr. Mendenhall? They asked him, part of the defense is what they did in the Holmes case is they were trying to portray these investors as sophisticated, experienced investors who basically didn't do their due diligence. So on cross-examination, they tried to get Mendenhall to acknowledge he's an experienced investor. Okay, great. Maybe he does admit he's an experienced investor. But can you still lie to, okay, my opinion here, can you still lie to people? You can't have people sign away fraud, right? If you give them a bunch of hooey balooey, then, and they rely on that, and it turns out to be fraudulent, I think there's a problem there. So anyway, they tried to get him to acknowledge he's an experienced investor, and then they tried to get him to concede that it's not unusual for a private company like Theranos not to want to turn over their financials or any of their corporate details. Okay, that's fair, right? He said that he was given, most companies provide annual and quarterly updates, so why wouldn't they be providing this information? And he testifies he didn't get anything during that period of time. Then they tried to get Mendenhall, the witness, to admit that he knew Theranos technology had to be refined. That's an interesting word. Had to be refined. Is that conceding that it's not working? Anyway, it had to be refined, but Mendenhall wouldn't concede to that point. He said, I had no knowledge if they needed to refine the technology for any reason. He had no knowledge. So in other words, he relied on what Sunny Balwani was telling him, and he had no knowledge that there was any problems with the technology. So interesting point, though. All right, let me see what else we have here. So I'm getting to the last page here, and then I'll get to your comments, your questions here. Okay. Balwani's counsel wanted to, here's the thing, in the Holmes case, what's really important about these 6 counts of these 6 investor counts, which is what accumulates so much prison time for both Holmes and Balwani if he's convicted, what you need to focus on, in my opinion, is what was the investment decision based on by these investors? Okay, what was it based on? So they asked Mendenhall that they wanted to find out if he decided to invest in Theranos without first receiving the financial statements. Did he make his decision without seeing the financials? And they also pointed out that he knew that Walgreens invested $100 million. So in other words, what they're trying to get at is this Mendenhall investor, although he's not one of the individual investor counts, he definitely is part of the evidence relating to the conspiracy to defraud investors, which is count one. If they can show, if the defense can show that Mendenhall's decision was based on, his investment decision was based on the fact that Walgreens was investing, not based on any financials from Theranos or anything that Sunil Balwani said, maybe that amounts to reasonable doubt. Okay? So then what did they do? They wanted to find out whether or not Mendenhall knew if Sunil Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes were dating. And this came up with the testimony of the witnesses yesterday or Wednesday. He said he didn't know that Holmes and Balwani were dating, but that information could have impacted his investment decision. And they asked him why. Okay. He said that executives should disclose to corporate boards and general counsel if they're dating to let us have a full view of the company, because there's always potential conflicts when the two leaders of the firm are involved. Now, it's up to the jury whether or not that matters to them, whether or not they were dating, but it certainly could matter towards how close their contact was, whether they were keeping in constant communication, which is what the prosecution alleges, right? Underlying the conspiracy and maybe proving the conspiracy. So they also, on redirect, which I call rehabilitation, right? So the prosecution on redirect asked Mendenhall if the amount of information he was given about Theranos was unusual. He said it was unusual. It was unusually non-existent. So he wasn't provided with information, which could cut either way here, right? So if he's not given information from Theranos, what's he making his decision on? The defense could claim. The prosecution would say they're not providing information because if they did, then they're making possibly misrepresentations, possibly giving people evidence of their fraud, possibly. I don't know. All right. Then on redirect, the government asked why he made the decision to invest. And he said, quote, there were incredible pedigreed of pretty smart people who were investing in Theranos, and I dropped my judgment a little bit, but I relied on Balwani's statement and would not have invested without them, without Balwani's statement, I assume. These were very, very specific and compelling details. Okay, so on one hand, Mendenhall is telling you that he is relying on Balwani's statement. So that shows, if those statements are false, that shows evidence of fraud. But if he's saying he also was considering the pedigree of investors of pretty smart people, and the fact that Walgreens also invested, what is his decision to invest based on? Was it based on representations made by Balwani, or was it based on Walgreens and the pedigree of investors? You see what I'm getting at? And does that amount to reasonable doubt for a jury? Okay, just my analysis. You let me know what you think. All right, then let's see. The next thing that happened was Balwani's counsel wanted the judge, they want to revisit the part about getting in the investor call that Elizabeth Holmes had. And one of the defense attorneys asked the court to be allowed to bring the evidence in, potentially to possibly recross this witness or future witnesses. And the judge said that he's not going to let the investor call in unless the government enters it into evidence. And it looked like the defense attorney wanted to argue the point but the judge interrupted him and said, "You're not going to talk about the order I just made." And the defense attorney paused and said, "No, Your Honor, I'll hold my tongue." Do you remember, I think it was early on in this case where the defense attorney had to apologize to the judge because he was disagreeing with the judge's order and saying he was going to take the court's time to lay the foundation to get an exhibit in. Do you remember this? And when the judge said, basically, "Don't threaten me." So, this is the judge here, and this is a judge who potentially could sentence your client. Okay. So it's like, you don't want to piss off the DMV clerk either. Okay. So anyway, they finished with Patrick Mendenhall, and the next witness up was Brian Tolbert. Brian Tolbert testified in the Holmes case, and he was the one that I think it was 4.8 million. Let me double check here. $4.8 million that he invested in Theranos, and he is count 5. 4.875 million he invested in Theranos. So Brian Tolbert's going to be testifying. He invested it December 31st, 2013. So his testimony is continuing. So that's the highlights that I wanted to get to for today's testimony. And to give you the heads up on scheduling, just real quick before I get to your questions, is that there's right now, there is, let me get my notes, it's Friday. There is 12, so far there are 12 scheduled dates right now for the trial to continue. And it looks like there's not going to be trial on Friday, next Friday. So it'll just be Tuesday, Wednesday next week, but we don't know, that could change. But the court did add May 27th, June 7th through June 10th. So it looks like we're going into mid-June. So that's the scheduling update. Now let me look at the chat here, and then I'll get to your questions. What is my opinion on the A&E show live? I don't know. I don't have an opinion. Brian's parents went there the day after the park was reopened. Yes, they did. They did, but the reason it had been closed was to allow blah, blah, blah. What happens to Sonny's pending SEC settled, but Sonny didn't? I don't know. And I'm wondering, I don't know, Matthew. I don't know what's going on with the SEC lawsuit. I got enough on my plate on these cases. Okay, so you want to submit your questions, go ahead. Chat's open. So let me tell you some of the questions. I'm going to go to the Petito case. I got a couple real quick, and then I'll do a couple on the Balwani case. Okay, so shout out to Prickly Pear. He asked, or she, if the Petito Laundrie case is dismissed, does the judge have to submit any sort of rationale for his decision? Yes, it'll be a written decision. Will the high-profile nature of the case influences the judge's decision to either hear the case or dismiss? No. Judges deal with cases of all sorts of profile. They make their decisions, or they're supposed to make their decisions, on the evidence and the law. So, shout out to Alan Taylor. Thank you, Prickly Pear, for that question. So Alan Taylor asks, it still doesn't look like a case to me, the Petito versus Laundrie case. I feel for them having lost a child, and it's terrible. Both parents lost their children. But that doesn't follow the parents of a person who did the murder is responsible. Well, that's what they're trying to, the Petitos are saying, yes, the Laundries are responsible for their actions, right? Or for withholding information, for blocking Nicole Schmidt from getting information, from not telling him and going on a vacation, all that stuff that's in the amended complaint, the video I just did. So thank you, Alan, for that question. So Karen J said this, and a shout out to Karen, this will be an interesting case study, the Petito versus Laundrie, to show some real evidence. This will be an interesting case study for future cases. Yeah, it's definitely, in my opinion, a test case. So we'll see what happens. So thank you for that question. SR says, don't Gabby's parents have to show some real evidence to move the case forward? Well, that's what discovery is going to be about. They're alleging in their complaint, doesn't mean it's true, that the Laundries knew information. They had information. So in discovery, when both sides can ask questions, either written or take depositions, or ask them to produce documents such as phone records, text records, all that. Whether or not that amounts to enough evidence, we'll see. Because if it's not enough evidence, then Brian's parents can bring what's called a motion for summary judgment and get the case kicked out. So, in other words, if the judge does not grant the motion to dismiss coming up in the next couple of weeks, the case will proceed forward. They'll do discovery, and then at some point, Brian, the Laundries will make a motion for summary judgment, which is like another motion to dismiss. Okay, but that's down the road, right? That's down the road. All right, so Tom Swift, shout out to Tom. He asked, is beyond outrageousness a legal standard? Because Gabby's parents have to prove that Brian's parents' conduct was so outrageous, beyond the bounds of common decency, was atrocious and shocking to withhold information from parents seeking to find their daughter. So Tom's asking, is beyond outrageous a legal standard? Well, beyond outrageous is an element. It's an element that Gabby's parents have to prove. They have to prove that the conduct, the actions were outrageous. Okay, so it's a legal element, not a legal standard. Okay, so thank you, Tom, for that question. All right, so let me, Hugo asks, in civil cases, can you appeal a verdict? Yes, you can, but it's called a judgment. Civil cases are judgments, criminal cases are verdicts. Okay, and the defendant has the right to appeal in criminal and civil cases. Are you following the Depp Heard trial? No, not very much at all. Okay, so Viola, I'm still amazed how no one addresses the legal privilege the level of privilege Holmes exercised. I'm still amazed how no one addresses the level of privilege Holmes exercised. I don't know what you're referring to, but I will tell you this. As part of one of the pretrial motions was that the prosecution, well, I'll put it this way, Holmes's defense wanted to keep out, and they did it also in the Balwani case, their lifestyle, right? All the toys and the homes and the money that they had, okay, which isn't really relevant. So it wasn't admissible, okay? So in other words, the judge ruled that they weren't allowed to get into, how much money they have in the bank or what level. If that's how you're referring to privilege, I don't know. Tony, thank you very much, Tony. Okay, so let me get to Balwani. So here's some really good questions. And again, put them in the chats. Are you guys voting? Okay, you're voting. Right on. So do vote in that poll. How do you think the trial is going for Sunny? Matthew asks. So far, well, if you watched my damning, what did I say? The defense damages the government's case, that video, they made some significant leeway there. However, this witness today, Patrick Mendenhall, certainly gave the jury an impression of what the investor, or what in particular this potential investor who turned out to be an investor, what Sunny told him. So, that's putting Sunny on the hook for that larger conspiracy to defraud investors, because Mendenhall isn't one of the individual investors he's accused of defrauding. Okay. So, yeah, audacities. Yeah, that's good. Audacity is a good word. Well, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I think the jury, convicting Holmes of 4 counts, even when she took the stand. As I said, when the verdict came out that night, I said, I thought it was a very fair verdict for Holmes. So, yeah. All right. Let me get your questions here on Balwani. So, and his band said, great video. Thank you very much. And saying he or she's referring to the defense damages the government's case video, saying that it was really sharp that they managed to torpedo the DeVos counts. Also, as he or she pointed out, it's going to be hard to pin Sunny down to making false claims about the Edison in the mini lab? Well, it depends on what the other investors say, right? We still haven't heard from the investor witnesses. And keep in mind, Sonny was going to the Newark lab all the time. I think he actually owned the Newark lab. He was the one who was back and forth with those texts with Elizabeth, talking about it was a mess. It was, he was having problems all the time at the lab. So that evidence is still going to roll out in Balwani's case. Okay, so then, hi, Sandy. Thank you for checking in and saying hello. Hello. Okay, Viola asks, are former employees such as Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung able to sue Holmes and Balwani for the amount of harassment and emotional distress they went through? Yeah, that's a great question. We have what's called a statute of limitations, meaning you have a period of time in which you can sue. For emotional distress and harassment, I don't know if it's a year or if it's 3 years to sue, and I think we're past that time. And frankly, I bet you Erica, and you can ask them. I don't know Erica or Tyler. They probably want nothing to do with either one of these two. So, and it looks to me like they've done quite well after they left Theranos. So, they had the courage to stand up and, and say what they saw and to speak the truth. That to be a whistleblower, that takes a ton of courage. So, okay. Let me get to other questions here. Rock said, shout out to Rock. There was no way it would have worked. I guess the technology would have worked. Holmes forgot that even a teen can write code and start a company, but inventing a machine requires years of study and practice. Somebody will do it eventually, but not a college dropout. I think that was Rock play on the Dropout series. Okay. Thanks for that, Rock. Okay. Andrew McNeil. He said, and this is interesting, it's a shame they don't take into account the moral impact of the money on the investor. The moral impact. I don't think the DeVos family would lose any sleep or made any real significant life changes because of this. For instance, Murdoch is not listed. Yeah, Murdoch's not one of these counts either. Murdoch is not listed because he just shrugged his shoulders. I don't know if he did or didn't. And wrote it off as a tax loss. I don't know if he did or didn't, but he did say the lady who put up the $99,000 to boost her retirement fund, she probably will. Well, it was actually Alan Eisman who put up $99,000, and that's the count 3. He's one of the investors, and he's probably going to be testifying just like he did in the Holmes case. He'll probably be testifying in the Balwani case. Okay, and I said to Andrew that I think the judge understands moral impact. The moral impact of allegedly defrauding people. And I think the jury considered that. So let's see. That's it for those questions. Let me see. What do you guys have in the chat? Hi, Linby. Was Sonny the one who set up the separate entity to purchase semen machines? Somebody else said that. I think, who's the one that knows this information? If you can add it to the chat or put it in the comment, I'll put it with this video. So was Sonny the one who set up the separate entity to purchase the Siemens machines? I didn't hear about that in the Holmes case, but maybe it's going to come out in the Balwani case. That it's not the actions of a duped investor. Your thoughts on this if this was brought up during trial? Well, it's going to incriminate him even more, right? If he's the one that set up a separate entity, what's he doing buying Siemens machines? Several of the witnesses testified in the Holmes case. Some of the employees said that they were using third-party machines, right? So what is Sonny doing? If he did this, what is he doing buying Siemens machines under a separate entity? Not under Theranos, but under a separate entity. I think you guys can figure out what that's about. Okay, Matthew said the prosecution hinted that there may be future indictments. Is it safe to say those people will not be called as witnesses? No. No. And that brings to mind, I don't know, did any of you guys see Alec Baldwin in the Rush shooting? They just released the videotaped interview he did with the police, where he spoke with the police for like over an hour and told them his whole side of the story. And then at the end, they dropped the bomb on him, which was very unfortunate that Helena Hutchins died. That's why there's a right to remain silent. And that's why, sometimes you want to reach out to counsel. But, if people are going to be testifying and then they're indicted later, that's a problem. But here's what happens. Usually, if you are going to be taking the witness stand and you think there's any possibility of this coming back to bite you as an indictment or otherwise, then you're going to ask for immunity. So for instance, in the Scott Peterson case, right? The whole reason Scott Peterson wants to throw out his verdict is to say there was juror misconduct. Strawberry shortcake, Rochelle Nice withheld, didn't answer the jury questionnaire correctly by saying she had, been abused by her boyfriend. Well, before she took the witness stand in that hearing regarding jury misconduct, she asked for immunity. You see? Because she wanted to be protected in case anything she said could be used against her along the lines of perjury, right? So she was given immunity, therefore she testified. So, by the way, Matthew, I don't know, these indictments were 2018. We're 4 years out. I don't know if there's going to be any more indictments. So, just my thought. Okay, so just got the live video. You didn't. Sorry about that. I don't know why YouTube didn't let you know, but you're here now. So, hi, I'm at IO. Okay, so Hugo Byrne asks again, do you think would be a better civil trial than a criminal for Alec? Well, I think there's going to be both. Absolutely. I think there's going to be a wrongful death lawsuit against Alec Baldwin by her husband, and I think she had a son, a young child. Criminally, strong possibility that he's going to be charged with something. Maybe it's negligent, some kind of negligent homicide. I don't know. I'm not a New Mexico lawyer. I'm a California lawyer. But what I understood from the sheriff in New Mexico is that investigation, I think they're going to know in the next couple of weeks what they're going to be doing as far as whether they're going to be charging anyone with anything criminal regarding the death, the unfortunate, tragic death. Accidental, right? But, you can be accidental, but it can still be negligent, right? Negligent in the sense of, was the gun checked, before Alex shot? All of that, who handled the gun? All of that that's coming out now. So we'll find out. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the poll here and see what names. So if you have any names for the community, let's see how we're doing. Is it going to show me the poll? Okay. Oh, so we got 41. We're tied. 41% analyzer, 41% legalizers, and 18% suggestion. Okay, you guys. That's reasonable. That right there, 41 to 41. Okay, we need some tiebreakers here. Maybe I'll make the decision, or maybe we'll make it at the next live stream. Okay, so do you have any other questions? We got 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Otherwise, I can talk to you about some other stuff. Shall I just go ahead? All right. So there was Dewan. So I forgot to mention Dr. Sunil Dewan testified on Wednesday. He was the lab director after Adam Rosendorf left. Okay, he stepped in. It was approximately August of 2015. So why that's important, that time period relates to the patient counts, because most of the investment counts took place in 2013 and 2014. And then in 2015, we're dealing with the patient counts. Okay, so Dr. Dewan was the lab director. Adam Rosendorf left. Dewan comes in. But the thing about Dewan is that the prosecution brought up, he's a dermatologist. What's he doing dealing with blood testing, right? And so I went and looked at one of the exhibits, which was the job description for lab director at Theranos. And the job description was minimum qualifications, basically to have a license to practice medicine, which he has, and a specialty in diagnostic immunology, chemistry, hematology. I'm not a scientist. And microbiology, and must have earned a bachelor's degree in chemical, physical, or biological science, and have at least 4 years in lab training and experience. I don't know. Did Dewan have that? Anyway, he signed here that he did, apparently. Then, Lynn, I did share what happened today in Balwani's trial. No, not. I'd say it's a toss-up day. I don't know if it's a better day for the prosecution. It's a toss-up, maybe leaning a little bit more towards the prosecution, because they were able to use this investor witness, Patrick Mendelson, although he's not one of the specific counts relating to defrauding an investor. His testimony goes to the defrauding, the conspiracy between Holmes and Balwani to defraud investors, because he invested $50,000 of his own money. His firm invested $1.4 million. And he did tie Balwani to that conspiracy potentially count, because he did say that he had a 45-minute phone call with Balwani, and that based on the science that Balwani told him, and based on Balwani's understanding of all the details and having a strong grasp, that he and his company invested. So, that potentially ties Balwani to the investor counts, the conspiracy to defraud investors, and potentially the individual investors, because the defense wanted to get in Elizabeth's call, investor call, which, by the way, the judge cautioned. Interesting. The judge cautioned and asked the defense to think about, do they really want to get in that investor call? And so I was thinking about that. I was thinking, why would the judge say it? Well, the judge might be trying to say, if you play that investor call, it's all these statements that incriminates Elizabeth Holmes, right? And could potentially incriminate Balwani. I don't know. I don't know if that's what the judge was thinking. I'm just guessing. Okay. But at this point, that investor call by Elizabeth Holmes didn't come in. The government isn't bringing it in at this point, because I think Mendenhall gave strong testimony tying Balwani to statements that he made, which the government is alleging are fraudulent, right? So the jury could conclude that, oh no, it wasn't just Elizabeth Holmes that made these statements. Balwani made these statements to Patrick Mendenhall. Didn't tell him they were using third-party devices, didn't provide financials. Why would you not provide financials? Okay. So somebody asked, let's see, Viola Edwards asked, do you know if any of the patents formerly owned by Theranos actually have any value? I don't. If so, will Ian Gibbons' widow receive any compensation? I don't know. I don't know about that. Do you guys know? If you do, jump in. Okay, Matthew asks, how do you think Sonny will do on the stand? He is not as likable. Well, there's a lot of preparation we can do with our clients. Okay. And I don't know. Do you think Sonny's the kind of guy who's going to want to remain silent? I don't know. He that's where his defense counsel, can work with him and, prepare. I'm not saying coach. I'm saying prepare witnesses so that if he does take the stand, I think Sonny Balwani probably understands maybe what the consequences are. Okay, so Lynn says, thanks for sharing. Understand how this could be a tie for Balwani. Yeah. Yep, definitely tie Balwani to the conspiracy counts. Okay, the other thing I found was another. Lynn B said Tyler Schultz said he had the personality of gravel. Balwani had the personality of gravel. Well, there's 12 jurors, okay? They're going to evaluate, and they're specifically instructed to evaluate the credibility of witnesses. He might want to take the stand. Okay? So anyway, I found an email that was given to Dr. Dewan, and it's reinforcing the prosecution saying that Dewan was basically hired to sign a bunch of validation reports, right? He hardly ever went to the lab at all, this dermatologist, and that he was getting additional compensation and options with Theranos that Sunny gave him. That was some of the testimony and some of the exhibits. And here, during the time that Dewan was on the stand, he also testified that he was unaware that there was another part-time lab director by the name of Lynn Sawyer who was also signing off on these SOPs on the validation reports. So that doesn't help Balwani. You know, what kind of lab were they running? Where the lab directors don't know each other? You've got one that's, dermatologist, he's hardly ever there. And then there's an email where Sunny asks Dr. Dewan to be present during the audit, just, initially, so he could be introduced, to give the appearance possibly to the investigators who are auditing the lab. That can't be that helpful towards Balwani. But again, we still have many witnesses to hear from. Okay, so let me see what. It's difficult to believe that lawyers don't give a wink and a nod when preparing their clients for testimony, when their clients are millionaires, celebrities, or could make their career. Do you want me to respond to that? Okay. Yeah. These are not easy cases. Based on the evidence that I saw in the Holmes case, I think the verdict Elizabeth Holmes got, I think, was a good verdict for Elizabeth Holmes, in the sense that there was a lot of evidence. Hearing her on calls, all the emails, but there is room for the defense. There is room. There is some ways in which, I'm not an advocate here. None of my videos are I'm not trying to be an advocate. I'm trying to stay neutral and just tell you, objectively as much as I can be, and hopefully I'm coming across as objectively. I'm just trying to show you what the evidence says to me. I'm analyzing, okay? So I'm not taking a side here. But, it's the defense's obligation. It's their obligation when we represent clients to point out the weaknesses. If there's reasonable doubt, to show it, okay? It's not, I'm not talking about the, John Carreyrou's book or the Hulu series. I'm just saying what I saw when I was watching that trial. That's this is the evidence. This is just my opinion, what I've seen. So Sunny Balwani's case is a different case. The defense is approaching it differently. And by the way, let me just tell you one thing. What the defense did, and again, look at the video I did on the defense damaging. I think I did it on Wednesday's video, damaging the government's case, when they were able to impeach Lisa Peterson, potentially impeach Lisa Peterson, who was the witness for that $99 million investment by the DeVos family, which is the lion's share of the amount of loss. The more money that you defraud someone of, the more time you're going to spend in prison. If the defense was able to impeach Lisa Peterson, and I don't know if they did or didn't, that's up for the jury to call, but to show that her testimony is different when she testified in front of the grand jury than she did in court. She said that Elizabeth Holmes at the grand jury didn't give any specifics, but when she was in court, she said definitely Elizabeth Holmes made these representations. She wasn't aware of Balwani being at the meeting, though. But, that kind of testimony, that ability to impeach, could make the jury question whether or not what representations were made. Again, that's Elizabeth Holmes, but we're in Balwani, and whether that implicates Balwani depends on whether or not they determine there's a conspiracy. Okay, whether the jury determines a conspiracy. Okay, how did you come to provide commentary during the Elizabeth Holmes trial? Well, I've provided a lot of legal analysis from O.J. Simpson, the first case, when I was much younger. And I was curious about the case because of the domestic violence angle, because I thought, how can they get into the whole domestic violence when you're dealing with a fraud trial? Oh, and by the way, hit the like button. And so I was curious. And so I went to the trial, and then they started asking me questions, and I'm like, okay, all right, let me tell you what my analysis on this. And slowly but surely, all the reporters kept asking me questions. I went out of curiosity, and I was only going to go just for a very little bit, but then I got intrigued. I got hooked. And given all of the experience I have analyzing cases and being all over the place, on all sorts of media, and given, given the amount of trials I've had and the experience I have, there aren't many people. And I've been fortunate. I've had tremendous mentors. And I worked really hard. So anyway, it was curiosity. All right, so let's see. Remind everyone to like the video. Yes. Perfect timing. Remind everyone. Yep. I was glued to the TV during OJ. Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was an interesting case. Very interesting. So, and given that I train lawyers, how to do an opening, how to do a closing, how to do a cross. Having stood in their shoes and having supervised many lawyers in trial. So, I was given a tremendous amount of experience, and I worked really hard to get there. So anyway, that's why, and I started this channel to provide more of my analysis, because when I was on nightly news or CNN or everywhere else that I showed up, the reporters in the story, they could only do like 2 minutes or maybe 10 seconds of what I said. And people started reaching out to me. Even at court, spectators would come up to me and say, where can we get more of your analysis? And I'm like, so I got courageous and decided to start a YouTube channel. And thank you all so much for supporting me, really. And send your questions. And let me know if there's other cases, that you want me to take a look at. All right. So, because I think it's great. I think it's important that we all know what's going on, learn about our legal system, figure out what's going on. And the reason we have public courtrooms, the reason that it's an open public courtroom, is because we have the right as citizens to make sure that what's going on inside those courtrooms is justice, right? That's why, the defendants are entitled to a fair and a public trial, right? So we have, as citizens, we are supposed to be safeguarding and monitoring our systems, our criminal justice system, our civil system. So I think it's important that we know, what's going on in these trials. That's just my opinion. Besides which, it's interesting to me. And apparently it's interesting to you, which is great. Okay, so let me see. Any other questions before I get out of here? Okay, the protocol software was designed to deceive the investors. Well, that could be argued, right? The null protocol, I think the defense in the Holmes case brought up, well, wasn't some of these investors just wanting to look at the Edison? They didn't want to really use it. It was just kind of a show and tell. So maybe they didn't really try to deceive. I don't know. But it, certainly suggests some kind of deception, in my opinion. Okay, I've been watching everything on OJ lately. I was dating a lawyer during the trial. He predicted the outcome early. I am just beginning to accept that they did not prove it. Well, I'll let you make the call on that. Okay, any other questions? I don't want to keep you guys. It's Friday night. I'm sure you all have a life. So, we still have analyzers, 44%. You need to vote in the poll. Looks like the analyzers is winning. Legalizers is 39%. We got 17% others. So I'll take a look at that. All right. So any other questions before I get ready to sign off here? Okay. So I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you very much for subscribing. Oh, yes. And have a great weekend to you too, Tony. So trial starts on the Balwani case Tuesday, Wednesday, no Friday at this point. Okay. So keep sending your comments. Keep supporting my channel. And, let other people know. I want to keep growing this community of you inquisitive souls out there. This is great. Yes, Matthew, thank you very much. And I'd like to do another live stream. Thank you, Hugo. I appreciate you guys joining me. So everybody have a good weekend. Leave your comments if you weren't able to participate in the chat. Okay, thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you, Lynn.